Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. You're tuned into Pre-Flight Checklist, first time flyers essential guide to drone rules and regulations with Greg Reverdiau. Greg, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
Thanks for coming on. As those who know me know, I need this more than anyone out in our audience. So I'm going to be getting my notepad out and tuning in. Today, I'm a viewer, not just a host. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I want to thank you once again for joining us. And to all of you out there, if you do have any questions, feel free to get them in and we'll try to get your questions answered once Greg wraps up here. Greg, I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let me go ahead and start by sharing my screen here. And we are going to be talking about drone rules. And this is what we do. I'm Greg from Pilot Institute. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself in a second here. I want to make sure that you understand who I am and kind of where I'm coming from with this, and kind of building a little bit of trust that the information I'm going to give you is going to be very valuable. I'm the founder, the lead instructor at Pilot Institute. I've also been a flight instructor with the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, now for a little over 20 years. I'm also a commercial pilot airplane, and then of course I'm a remote pilot, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I've got 20 years of experience doing this. I managed flight training organizations before I started Pilot Institute. So I used to manage fleets of aircraft and people that wanted to learn how to fly airplanes. I'm also an FAA Fast Team representative and a drone pro. This is a volunteer position with the FAA where we help the FAA representatives to talk to people when they have issues, maybe give some recurrent training as well on the drone side and on the airplane side. And then I'm an FAA industry partner, that's Pilot Institute, and then a course author on the FAA website. So we do a lot of work with the FAA, as you can tell. A little bit more about Pilot Institute. We do online training for unmanned and manned aircraft pilots. So if you want to be a full-blown, full-size aircraft pilots, then we teach you how to do that. And then if you want to be any kind of drone pilot, whether recreational or commercial, we also do that. We just passed 300,000 students a couple months ago. We're at 315 now. We've trained 95, almost 95,000 remote pilots. In 21, 22, and 2021, we train 25% of all remote pilots every year now. And we've done that very successfully. We got a 99.9% pass rate. And then the average on the exam is 92% for our students. The national average is about 81, 82, depending on the year. And then we have a lot of courses in our catalog, 41 courses at the moment in our catalog. But today we're here to talk about recreational flying. And then at the end of it, I'm going to talk a little bit about Part 107 because this is something that you may have heard people talk about. I'll talk about the difference between the two, but we always have people say, what can I do with the drone? Now, this is more on the commercial side of things, but maybe you're an enthusiast right now and you're looking to move on to the next thing. Which means you could do photography, videography. This is pretty obvious. You're using your drone for real estate photography or videography, for shooting weddings or journalism, or really being on movie sets if you have a larger drone and a bit more skills. You can also do mapping, which is really cool. So take the drone, fly the drone over a specific area, take a bunch of pictures, and then bring them back into a software. And that software is going to create models, whether in 2D, 2D models, or in 3D, which are extremely impressive. You can do surveying, you can do construction progression work, meaning that if there's a building being built in your city, you can record these progression of the construction over time and give that to the people that are building this whole section, just to help them with figuring out if they're on time. And then volume measurement is something that's really cool as well with mapping, meaning you can use the data from the 3D model to figure out how much volume of dirt there is in a specific section. One of our guest instructor teaches our mapping courses, and that's what he does for a living. He basically goes out and measures different yards. They call them yards. And then they can tell the owner of the yard how much dirt there is in a specific area. It's really cool. You can use them for inspections, power line inspections, solar panel inspections, turbines, roof inspections. There's so many applications. There's also agriculture. This is a big growing industry at the moment. Plant health. mapping of different agriculture areas, and then also using them to spray chemicals or spray other things other than chemicals. Very large drones that are being flown over fields. And then there's drone delivery. You may have heard of drone delivery. There is a lot of different companies right now that are trying to get into drone delivery. Now, let's get to the rules. And this is where sometimes there's a bit of confusion, but there's two different ways that you can operate your drone. And I've kind of alluded to Part 107 already. Now, Part 107 is the main set of rules in the United States. And why do we call it Part 107? It's 14 CFR, Code of Federal Regulation, Part 107. I know it's a very specific number, but it's just where the regulation lives. It's an easy number to remember, so people call it Part 107. But it's the main set of rules in the United States to fly your drone. Now, at one point, the FAA said, well, if you're flying for recreational purposes, we want to make this a little bit easier. So we're going to carve out a set of rules outside of Part 107 that you can follow. And these rules are under 49 USC, the US code 44809. So that's what you see here in this slide. 44809 is the recreational drone exemption. It's an exemption from Part 107. And I want to make sure this is clear before we get started, because as we get to talk about Part 107 later on, I want to make sure that you understand the difference between these two rules. Now, under 44809, there's 10 different rules that you have to follow. And if you follow all of these rules, then you're good. You can fly under 44809, the recreational rules. Now, if you fail to meet even one of these rules, then your flight automatically reverts to Part 107 rules, because Part 107 is the main set of rules in the United States. So I want to make sure we understand that before we get in there. But I'm going to go over all 10 of these rules, and then, and we can discuss them. And if you have questions, leave them in the comments. I have time at the end to answer all of those. But rule number one, and that's the most important in here, the FAA says that in order to qualify for the recreational exemption, you need to fly strictly for recreational purposes. So I love using this example. Your kids are playing in the backyard, you pop up the drone, you get videos, photos of your kids playing, 100% recreational, okay? Now, you're filming yourself because there's a new drone coming out, and you're using that drone that you're going to use on the review on your YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel is monetized. It's no longer a recreational flight. Now you have a different purpose. You have a different reason for that flight. It's all about the purpose of the flight, okay? So in this case, the purpose of the flight is to film yourself so that you can use that footage for the review of a new phone. That's Part 107. That's no longer recreational. Here's a party favorite that the FAA mentions in some of their presentations. You're checking the gutters at your house. You decide to take off or go check the neighbor's gutters. That's no longer a recreational flight. It's Part 107. Now, I always use that one at the end because it's kind of a little bit ridiculous if you think about it. Are you going to fly your drone, and is it going to be different rules that you have to follow because you're checking the gutters? In theory, yes. But I wanted to make sure that this is clear as we get started. So that was rule number one. Rule number two, community-based organization guidelines. So the FAA has approved 4 community-based organizations. These organizations are non-for-profit. They've been around for a long time, and they promote aviation and model aviation across the country. And these organizations have come up with their own set of guidelines. Now, you may be wondering, why do we have 4 of them? Well, we have 4 of them because each of them kind of goes after a different segment of the population that fly drones. Flight Test, for example, you may be familiar with Flight Test. They have a big YouTube channel. They have the Flight Test Community Association. And that Flight Test Association, they put out rules for people that fly foamy aircraft. So fixed wing aircraft that fly with a little remote controller that you go fly at the park. That's Flight Test. There's another organization called FPV Freedom Coalition, and FPV Freedom Coalition is going to fly FPV drone, first person view. These are the drones where you put the goggles on and you go fly your drone. So they represent that segment of the hobbyist population. And there's 2 more. There is one that's based on STEM Plus, and then there's the AMA as well. Each of these community organizations have a set of guidelines. Before you fly, you have to pick one of these guidelines. And the question I get all the time is, where do I find those? Go on their website. FTCA is the Flight Test Community Association, ftca.org. And then there you'll be able to download their set of guidelines. They're usually about 5 to 10 pages, depending on the association. And they'll give you a bit more in-depth information about flying over people, about flying at night. Those are the things that are not contained in 44809. They're contained in the guidelines. So once you pick that set of guidelines, just print the PDF, have it in your book or in your flight bag, and then you can refer to these guidelines. But that's one of the requirements by the FAA, is that you pick community-based organization guidelines. Is it free? Yes, you can use these without joining the organization. Now, if you feel like they're doing a good job, you can join and have a membership with them, but it is not required. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is an important one. Must maintain visual line of sight. So visual line of sight is essentially you being able to see the drone. It means that if it goes behind a building, if it goes behind a tree, if it goes 2 or 3 miles away from you, it's no longer visual line of sight, which means that, well, technically you can't fly the drone that way. The FAA also says that you can use a visual observer. Now, a visual observer needs to be co-located next to you to help you and communicate with the operator of the drone. Why would you use a visual observer? Well, maybe you're filming and you're trying to frame this nice shot and you want to have a second set of eyes that is looking for helicopters, that is looking for other aircraft, maybe even looking for people on the ground that are nearby. Make sure that you're not flying over them. You cannot fly your drone over people. So that's what the visual observer would do. The FAA also says that if you're flying FPV, first-person view operation, using the goggles, you need to have a visual observer. It's a requirement. People often ask, do I need to be looking at my drone at all time? Like flying with the controller in my hand, do I need to be staring at the drone at all time? And the answer is no. You need to be able to see the drone at all time. So you need to be able to see the drone as it's flying around so you don't lose so you always know where it's located in the airspace, if that makes sense. So that's rule number 3, visual line of sight. Rule number 4 is a pretty straightforward one, common sense. Do not interfere with other manned aircraft that are flying in the area. If there's a helicopter flying at low altitude, do not interfere. If you're flying near an airport, which we'll get to, you could technically fly near an airport with being very careful. Do not interfere with manned aircraft. So that's one of the very important one in there. Next, 5 and 6, those 2 rules I put together because they're easier to understand that way. But fly at or below 400 feet above the ground. That's a very important one. You have to be at or below 400 feet above the ground. Make sure that you get authorization. Make sure that you get authorization from the FAA before you fly in that airspace. And so it's going to have to be in class Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. And you're going to look at me like, what is that? What does that mean? Well, anytime you're near an airport, the FAA has built a special set of airspace to protect that airport. And that's mostly designed for manned aircraft pilots. But the FAA says if you're going to fly into one of these airspace called controlled airspace, then you need to get a special approval. And the good news is it's very simple to get that approval. You can download an app on your phone. It's called Aloft Air Control or Aloft Air Aware. Air Aware is actually the app that was designed for recreational pilots. We actually work with Aloft. Aloft is the company that provides LANS authorization to design the app just for you, for recreational pilots. So you can see right there what the airspace looks like. They'll be able to tell you exactly how high you can fly and then give you approval right away. So I'll have more information on this. I'll give you, if you're interested in this, I can't spend the entire time talking about this because it gets pretty detailed, but I'll have more information for you in a minute. Now, I do want to mention, do not call air traffic control in order to get approval. Do not call air traffic control. So if you have the control tower, if you find their phone number, don't call them. In the past, that's how it used to be, like 6 or 7 years ago, and it's people still think that you have to do that, but you don't. Okay. Now this is what it looks like. The airspace that I talked about, the LANCE program from the FAA. You can see here there's a bunch of airports. Now this is Phoenix, close to us here. We're in Prescott, Arizona. Phoenix is very busy. There's all sorts of airports in the Phoenix area. And you can see there's green areas and there's red areas. Well, in the green areas, you can get approval almost immediately using your phone app in order to fly close to an airport. And if I zoom in a little bit, and I don't know if it's going to come up on your screen, I hope it does, you can see a bunch of different grids and a bunch of different numbers. Now, this is Phoenix International Airport. So this is a busy airport. It's a Class B airspace, Class Bravo airspace. And you see a bunch of numbers in here. Those numbers mean that you can fly up to that specific altitude here on that number grid with approval. So once you get approval to fly in that area, you'll be able to fly up to 100, 200, 300, maybe 400 feet near the airport. Now, because this airport is so big, they limit the height at which you can fly. And the closer you get to the airport, the lower you'll be able to fly. So as you get very close, there's what's called a zero grid, which means that you cannot fly in that airspace at all because you're too close to the airport. So that's the airspace. Like I said, I'll have a resource for you very soon that I'm going to share where you can learn more about this, because to me, this is one of the most important thing. Make sure that you get approval before you fly. And if you're too close to the airport, just don't fly. Okay. That's a matter of safety. Number 7, this is kind of a fun one, actually. I know it says tests, but it's really not a test. This is the trust program from the FAA. And this is something the FAA came up with a couple of years ago, and it's free training for drone pilots. And I love this program because, well, it allows people to learn something for free. It takes about 30 minutes. It's done on a bunch of different test providers. We're one of them. I'll give you the link in a minute. But you're going to head over to the Trust website, start the training, and when you're done with it, you'll get a completion certificate. And once you get that completion certificate, it means you're good to get started flying your drone for recreational purposes. So Trust is only for recreational purposes. I know the last T, it's called the Recreational UAS Safety Test. I wish the last T was training, because that's really what it is. It's free training to give you all the rules in more detail based on what I'm telling you right now. So you can go on our website. We're one of the trust provider that's approved by the FAA. As a matter of fact, we're the largest trust provider in the country. We've issued over 100 and I think last I checked 190,000 certificates. Trust.pilotinstitute.com, and you'll be able to take the training there for free. It's free. There is no cost, and it takes about 30 minutes. So I really want to emphasize on that. We're almost there. Rule number 8. This is a pretty straightforward one. You need to register your drone with the FAA. Now, there is a rule for recreational purposes. If your drone is less than 0.55 pounds, that's 250 grams. If it's less than 0.55 pounds on takeoff, it does not need to be registered. If it's larger than that, so if you have a Mini from DJI, for example, or the Autel Nano, there's a few more models that are on the it's called sub 250 gram drones. They do not need to be registered with the FAA. But be careful, because as soon as you put any equipment on top of it, like prop guards or a light to fly at night, for example, it's going to take that weight over 250 grams, at which point you need to register with the FAA. Now, the good news is it's rather cheap. It's $5 for 3 years. You're going to get one registration number for all of your drones that are flown for recreational purposes. So the one number is going to start with FA3 and then a bunch of digits after that. You get to put that on your drone. It has to be labeled clearly on the outside of the drone. And you can register. There's only one place to register. It's the FAA Drone Zone website. You'll make a free account, and then you'll be able to list all of your aircraft that are flown for recreational purposes. Please be careful. Make sure that you go to a .gov website. There are some schemes out there of people trying to pretend to be the FAA. I want to mention that because we have people that often get caught in the middle of that. If it's more than $5, you're in the wrong place. Go back and find the .gov website. Number 9 is a new one, fairly new. It's this thing called Remote ID. And Remote ID is something that the FAA put in place last year. And it's a way for your drone to broadcast its location to people nearby. And it's controversial, I'm not going to lie. Not everybody likes the idea of having their drone being spotted using an app. That's how you would do it. You would download an app and then be able to see other drones in the area. But unfortunately, it's a requirement by the FAA, so we have to abide by it. If your drone is registered or if it needs to be registered, so if your drone is sub 250 grams and flown recreationally, it does not need remote ID. But if it's over that weight, so if you have an Air from DJI or Mavic or a Phantom or any of these bigger drones, it's going to need remote ID. Now, the good news is a lot of drones these days have remote ID native to the drone itself, meaning that you don't need to have additional equipment. So it turns on when you start the drone and it turns off when you stop it. So there's nothing you have to do really, but you need to verify that your drone is compatible. There's a link right here. Hopefully we can make a list of links available for everyone. I know I shared a lot of links here, but this link right here will allow you to put your aircraft type into this FAA website, and then the FAA will tell you if it's compatible with remote ID. So if you have a recent drone, I'm going to say a drone that was manufactured after 2020 from the most popular drone makers out there, then, no, not 2020, I'm sorry, I'm taking that back, 2022, in the last 2 years or 3 years, then that drone is going to be more than likely compatible with remote ID. There are exceptions, obviously, but if you have an Air 3, an Air 2S, if you have a Mini 3, a Mini 4, if you have any of the Mavic 3 or Mavic 3, that's all we have now. And the Mavic 2 is not compatible, but anyway, there's a pretty big list. So if your drone is not compatible, then you will have to use what's called a remote ID module. It's an additional device that you're going to buy separately and put on top of your drone. Now, the cheapest one at the moment is around $70, $80, which is not cheap. But as a recreational pilot, if you have more than one drone, you can use the same module on a bunch of different drones. Every time you fly, you just grab it, you put it on, kind of like a light, and then you put it on your drone, and then it's compatible. So that's remote ID right here. There's always a ton of questions about remote ID, so make sure that you put them in the comments if you have them. And then rule number 10 is, again, one of these common sense rule, I would say. Do not operate your drone in a dangerous manner. That seems to be obvious. Don't interfere with emergency vehicle, law enforcement activities. Typically, they're going to have helicopters flying at low altitude, especially if there is an emergency. I see this quite a bit where there is maybe a fire going on somewhere in the distance. People get curious, they fly their drone, they go right over the fire. Well, keep in mind, public safety agencies like fire departments are using drones themselves in order to find information about the fire. They have thermal cameras on the drones where they can spot exactly where the fire started, so they can, give it to the people on the ground. So if you see this, stay away from them. I'm not saying don't fly your drone, but I'm saying be extra careful. Maybe fly lower, fly from a distance, use a zoom if you're curious about what's going on. But keep in mind, don't interfere. Another one is an accident on the side of the road. Well, keep in mind, they might be sending a helicopter to go get the people on the ground and provide transport to go back to the hospital, maybe. If they spot a drone in the area, they will not land the helicopter. You could be impeding with somebody getting their life saved, and that's a big deal. So if you see a crash on the side of the road, don't assume that you can fly your drone over the area. Just stay further away so you don't interfere with emergency operation. Wildfires is a big one. We live out west here, and we have wildfires every year. Don't fly your drone near wildfires because they're using helicopter and a large aircraft. And if they spot them in the area, if they spot a helicopter, they will stop all fire rescue. And so that's not good. Do not fly under the influence of drugs and alcohol. I think this is an obvious one, but I have to mention it because it's a dangerous operation. So I mentioned trust. Trust is free. It's a free resource. It's about 30 minutes. It doesn't have any videos in it because the FAA made it all text. So what we decided to do is create a free course called Recreational Flying Made Easy. And I'm not here to sell you anything. I just want to, this is a free resource, 100% free. You can find it on our website, Recreational Flying Made Easy. It's about 2 hours of content. And I go in detail. I show you how to submit a lance request. I talk about airspace. I talk about everything. Again, free resource. But if you're a new pilot, we designed this for you in mind specifically. We're also going to show you how to do your first flight, how to pick the right area, make sure there's no trees around you, make sure the weather is good, make sure the airspace is good. There's a lot of things going in here. So with that being said, I'm not done just yet, but we're still doing good on time. There's two ways to operate your drone. Remember, that's back to the slide we talked about earlier. You can operate under recreational rules, which is an exemption to Part 107, or you can operate under Part 107, which is all of drones flying in the US fly under Part 107 unless they qualify for the exemption. So let's say you don't qualify for the exemption, then you need to fly under Part 107. Now there's this thing called a remote pilot certificate. This is an actual certificate from the FAA. You'll get an actual remote pilot card certificate in the mail from the FAA that a lot of people call the commercial drone pilot certificate. Sometimes they call it a Part 107 license. It's got a lot of different names, but I figured I would mention all these names because it's really all the same thing. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to fly your drone for non-recreational purposes, or sometimes people say commercial purposes, but it's really for non-recreational purposes. And it's valid anywhere in the US. It's a federal certificate. It's valid anywhere in the US. Commercial drone pilot license, Part 107 license, remote pilot certificate, those are all the same thing, okay? Just so we're clear. When do you need it is the question. And the short answer is anytime you're going to be doing a flight for non-recreational purposes, okay? So anytime it's not flying for fun, recording your kids or whatever it is, collecting money actually surprisingly, or doing this for non-for-profit doesn't always matter. So let me explain. You could be doing this for your church, for example, as a free gift. You decide you're going to do footage for your church and give it to the church. Well, that's not a recreational flight. Now that falls under Part 107 because it's, well, non-recreational. If the intent of the flight is not for recreational purposes, then you need to have a Part 107 certificate. How do you get it? There's 5 easy steps. First one is get the knowledge. Okay, don't go take the test. Without getting the knowledge, you will fail and it's going to cost you money. But get the knowledge and get the knowledge based on the Airman Certification Standard. That's an FAA document that highlights everything you need to know for that test. This is what we do for a living. So we follow the SES to the T. That's our Bible. That's where we find all of our information. Pass the FAA written exam. So you have to go and do that in person at a testing center. I'll talk about the exam in a second. Once you do that, once you pass, then you're going to apply for the certificate on the FAA website. And then after a few days, they're going to give you a temporary certificate. It's a PDF that you download from the FAA website. And then after 30 to 40 days, you're going to get your actual certificate in the mail. It's that simple. On paper, it's 5 easy steps. Okay. Now let's talk about the exam. The exam is a 60 multiple choice question exam, and you must get at least 70% correct, okay? You have 2 hours to do it, and it's computer-based. It has to be done in person. Now, they're gonna give you a book with a bunch of figures in it that you'll have to refer to. We teach you all that in our course, so you make sure that you're not blindsided when you get there. It's not open book. You have to know your stuff. Everything has to be in your head. All you're allowed to bring is basically a simple calculator, no cell phone. So you can't phone a friend. You have to know the stuff before you get there, okay? And then the topics are numerous. Loading and performance for the aircraft, talking about center of gravity and lift and drag and all the forces. A big subject on regulation, Part 107 regulation, you have to know it all. Airport operation, radio communication. There's a big section on airspace and charts. This is where people usually have a hard time. Aviation weather is also pretty big. Aeronautical decision making. How do you make decisions as a pilot? And then physiological factors. How are things going to affect your performance as you're flying your drone? And then maintenance and emergency. So all these topics are all part of the exam. And the exam is paid, is with the FAA. It's with a third party that does the testing for the FAA. It's $175, and it's paid directly to them as you schedule for your exam. Now, they have something like 700 test centers all across the country. So you'll find one near you. I think the most I've heard people driving was like an hour and a half when you live maybe in a more sparsely populated area. Now, as far as studying, the FAA says you need to study at least 20 hours. We find that most of our students tell us they study between 30 and 40 hours for the exam. Now, they do really well on the exam. I'm sure you could get a bare 70 by studying a little bit less, but I don't think that's the goal here. You should be studying to know your stuff to be safe. That's at least my philosophy. But do you need 20 hours? Yes, you absolutely do. Now, if you fail, you will have to wait 14 days, and then you'll have to pay $175 again to the FAA testing center. Now, if you're one of our students, you'll get the course fee back if you fail, and then we'll pay for your retest. Now, I have to say, we've trained, like I said, almost 95,000 people now. We've had about 20 failures total ever. And so you're in good hands if you study with us. Now, I want to give you a quick listing about Pilot Institute. Again, I'm not here to sell you anything, but we do have a lot of courses available on our website. A lot of them are free, some of them are paid. I want to mention the very last one here, which is the deep dive courses. We have a little over 20 some deep dive courses for a variety of different drones. If you have DJI Air 3, for example, one of the newest drone out there, we have a free course for you, a free deep dive that goes over all the systems on the aircraft, all the different settings and everything. And all of these are available for free on the website. So make sure you head over to the website and enroll. There is pretty much every drone since the Mavic 2 from DJI, and we don't have only DJI, but I know it's a very popular brand, but we have Autel as well on there. We have Skydio drones. We have a bunch of different ones, but we also offer free registration stickers. This is 100% free. You give us your numbers, we'll put them on the sticker and we'll send them to you. You get 4 stickers, that's what they look like. And then that way you make sure that you're compliant with your drone. And they're nice and small, they fit right on your drone. And yeah, they're beautiful. And that's it. That's all I have. So I'm open for questions. I see there's a bunch in the chat. So Derek, all yours.
Greg, ton of great information. Thank you. It was so beautifully laid out. We already have the questions rolling in. We'll start.
It's hard to pack so much information into the into a short presentation.
I know. I figured we could probably go on for weeks and weeks about this. There's so much to dive into. And then you get into the situational stuff. And as you've probably seen, a lot of the questions here are situational things. I'm seeing a recurring theme here with deregistering. So there's going to be a couple questions on that. Norman Q joined us on YouTube, says, I registered my drone as it was above 250 grams with the extended battery. Do I need to deregister it if I'm just a recreational flyer? I have a trust certificate.
So what he's talking about is the fact that DJI recently on 2 models, the DJI Mini 3 and the Mini 4 Pro, they've changed the way that remote ID actually works. And if you have the larger battery, the drone no longer broadcasts. And so I'm sorry, if you have the smaller battery, the drone no longer broadcasts. So what he's asking is, I'm going to say the answer, if you have the smaller batteries that keep the drone under 250 grams, then deregister the drone from the FAA drone zone. It's not really deregistering, it's just removing it from your inventory on the FAA drone zone. So remove it from the inventory, remove the label from your drone, and then it's no longer registered, which means that now you can fly it without needing remote ID and also without needing to have a module on top of it possibly. And yeah, then you're good to go. But if you fly with a bigger battery, then it's going to have to be registered. Yeah, that's it. It makes it very confusing. Unfortunately, what DJI did made it very confusing. We did actually a full video on this on our channel just to explain this. And I think it's an 18-minute video just to explain this whole system.
I know it does get super confusing. With the remote ID, is that going to change at all where every drone will be required? Do you see that coming down the road? I mean, I've heard people talk about it, but I didn't know if it was something that is going to happen or is already in the works.
So I don't foresee them changing it because, well, the FAA doesn't create regulation. The FAA is being told by Congress to create regulation. So it would take an act of Congress to tell the FAA to change it. Uh, that happens every 5 years, roughly. The FAA is being told to create new regs by Congress during the FAA Reauthorization Act. The new one is actually around the corner, 2023. We should be getting one in the next couple of months, and it's not part of the proposed changes. So I don't see that happening. If it does, it will be another 5 years, but I don't think there's any motivation to do that. The good news is most of the drones these days come with remote ID already equipped inside the drone. So I think for most people buying new drones, they're not going to have to worry about it because the drone would already be equipped. So it's silver lining.
Okay, perfect. Constance Ross Photography joining us on Vimeo asking, is the app Before You Fly the best to vet a property that will need drone images?
So the app Before You Fly has been retired by the FAA and is no longer supported. So the app I would recommend now is called Air Aware. It's made by the same company that made the Before You Fly app. And then they just basically took the app and then reconverted it to their own app. So it's Air Aware. You can find it on the stores for your favorite drone, for your favorite phone. It works on both platforms. And yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Perfect. Visual Drone Productions joining us said, great show last night. How long should it take to receive my registration stickers for my drone from you?
Uh, right now, the person is on vacation, so we're gonna have a little bit of a backup, but usually it takes about 2 weeks for us to send those stickers.
Where do you see the everything going? I mean, it's a fairly new space.
Mhm.
You know, it's taking everything by storm. I still don't even think it's exploded to the heights it will explode. I think probably regulation is part of what's kept that in check a little bit. But where do you
Yes.
see it going in the near future?
So it's interesting. I've been in aviation for a long time now. I've seen the FAA on the manned aircraft side of things, and I've seen the way they do things. And I think they're doing it backwards now with drones, and not backwards, not being in a negative way. On the manned aircraft sides for the last 50, 60 years, they've created more rules as things were happening. So things have gotten tighter and tighter. On the drone side, I think they started the other way around because it's a big unknown, right? We don't know these drones. We don't really know what they're capable of doing. We don't know. So they started very heavy-handed, and now they're starting to remove some of these restrictions. So Part 107 came out in 2016. Since then, we've seen a change already in the regulation in 2021 where the FAA changed the rules for flying over people. It's more relaxed. Flying at night used to require a waiver. Now we don't need a waiver. We can actually fly at night without
Interesting.
specific approval. So now they're looking at beyond visual line of sight. I'm in a couple committees actually where we talk about beyond visual line of sight and helping the FAA understand how that actually works. So right now you cannot fly your drone beyond visual line of sight, but in the next few years, the FAA is working on regulation that's going to help alleviate that or making it a little bit easier. It's not going to be super easy, but it's going to be a little bit easier. So I think we're going in the right direction. Like you said, this is booming. It's so exciting. Every day I hear new people using drones for different things. And man, this is just so much fun.
It is. It has me. The regulations have me so scared. I think mine's been locked up in a bin. I live in the city, so it's like without getting out of the city,
Yep.
you can't really do much with it. And I think that's a good thing. It's good to be cautious. The last thing you want is a bunch of people just out flying renegade routes all over and doing whatever they
Especially in New
want to
York
do,
City.
especially
Yeah.
in New York City. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It's
you cannot
uh,
fly. Let's be clear. You cannot fly in New York City. There is a new process that was put in place by NYPD where you can request access if you're a commercial pilot and you want to do that. It's lengthy, but it's also understandable. It's a big city and yeah, with a big history.
it's a one big giant flight path. I mean, I have
Yep.
planes and everything flies low. If it's not a plane, it's a helicopter flying over my
Yep.
building. So Timothy joining us on YouTube says my stickers are falling off due to the humidity in South Florida. I tried to get replacements, but it says I can't register to get replacements. Can I purchase them from you?
Tell them to, so send us an email, contact@pilotinstitute.com. We'll send you another set of stickers. That's not a problem. Yeah, they're waterproof, but the humidity in Florida, we don't have humidity in Arizona, so we can't really test it. But ours are still sticky on our side.
I love this question. If I grew up on a planet without video games and need to learn basic controls before even buying a drone, do you have any app or simulator advice?
Yes, there are some simulators out there that you can download. There is one, oh, and I'm horrible with names all the time. Um, yeah, I'm not going to remember it. Uh, Maybe I can share a link somewhere. But
There we go.
yeah, so stand by 1 second because it also depends on what you want to do, uh, depending on the type of drones that you're going to fly. So you might be flying an FPV drone, which is going to be completely different than flying a more traditional drone. So I'm going to put the link in here. I'm going to put it in our Zoom, and maybe somebody can share it. But
Yeah, Dan, we'll
this
have
is
Danny get that.
yeah, we basically there's 5 simulators and that we highly recommend. And Little Arm is the name of the company that does the first one that we like. But DJI, so Zephyr is the one that I would recommend because it's very closely related to a typical drone. Now, DJI also has their own simulator. So if you have an FPV drone from DJI, the Avata or the DJI FPV, you can actually plug in your drone and plug in your controller and practice using the goggles and everything. So it works really well at teaching the basics. Flying a drone, a traditional drone, is not very difficult. Flying an FPV drone is going to be a bit more, have a little bit more requirements, put it this way.
I was going to ask you, what's the learning curve going from? Because you're right, flying. I mean, especially with the technology now, they basically do. If you have a halfway decent drone, it does everything itself, and you
Yep.
can go out in an open space and learn your way in a day.
Yep.
FPV scares the yeah, it
Yeah.
scares me.
FPV is different because it doesn't have altitude hold, it doesn't have GPS, it doesn't have all these things. So you have to fully control the aircraft at all times. And so it requires slightly different skills, and you have to really understand what everything does. Now, here's my recommendation, and here's how I get into it because I didn't start with FPV. Some people do, but I recommend actually the DJI FPV. And the reason is it has a oh crap button, I'm going to call it that, on the side. It's a pause button. And if you do anything, so I take mine off. I took mine off to about 200 feet in an area where I could fly to 400 feet. And I put it at 200 feet, and then I put it in full manual mode. And then I started flying, seeing what it did. And if I get in trouble, I push that pause button. I had my index finger right on it, push the pause button, and the aircraft, if it's flipped upside down, it's going to recover and hover. And then now it's acting like a traditional GPS aircraft, and with altitude hold and position hold. And then you go back to 200 feet, and you keep trying, and then you keep getting lower and lower and lower. But it builds your confidence to the point where you know you're not going to flip it over and break it because it's got that pause button. So that would be my recommendation.
That's the keyword, confidence. I think every time I've had an issue, it's not even like the big it's the branches. It's the
Yes.
you get yourself and you're flying and then you panic and you hit,
Yep.
the right paddle instead of the left paddle, or you hit up
Yep.
instead of down, and it's like that's where it gets you. Is you're not fully I think with the drone you have to be so it has to almost be second nature if you're just going to go out and fly it. You have to kind of be fluid with it.
Yep. Simulator time is really good for FPV. So get the DJI FPV or one of the ones in the article that I just sent, and then you'll be able to learn a lot more about that.
Perfect. Doc is asking, can I use my Part 107 certification when I travel to Canada?
Nope, it's US only. Canada has their own set of rules that are slightly different. Canada doesn't look at it from a commercial versus recreational. They look at it more from a safety mitigation type perspective, which quite frankly, I wish we did that in the US, but that's not the question. Canada has a basic and an advanced certificate. So make sure that you see if you fall under the basic, it's a lot easier. The advanced is going to require to do an in-person training and do an in-person check ride with someone. But that's usually if you want to do more complex operations. So for most people, the basic actually works really well. But yeah, look up the rules, but no, it doesn't transfer. And it doesn't transfer the other way either. Anybody coming from outside the US into the US with their country certificate, it's not going to convert.
Okay. And a follow-up question from Doc, can I transition my drone across a highway? Not hover. Can I cross over it to get to the other side?
not without a categorized drone, which is only available for Part 107 pilots. So as a recreational pilot, you categorically cannot fly over people or moving vehicles. Now, with that being said, you could transition over a highway if there are no cars on the highway. So it's not the highway that's the problem, it's the people in the moving vehicles that the FAA doesn't want you flying over. Now, if you're under Part 107, you could get a categorized drone that's part of the regulation. The problem is there's not a whole lot of them that are available. So there's 4 different categories. It gets pretty complicated, but at the moment, there's only one Category 3 drone approved by the FAA, no Category 2, and then there is a few Category 1 drones because they're self-approved. You need to meet some requirements, but they're very few and far between. So flying over people is still a bit of a holy grail, even if you're a Part 107 pilot.
This is why we need people like you, Greg, because it's all the little nuances. Like the part
Yes.
of, that you said about flying over the gutters. It's like I would never think that would be something that would require Part 107.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
it's a bit of an extreme. Yeah, that one is a bit of an extreme. I always like to mention it just so people understand the logic behind the rule, but it's all about the purpose of the flight.
okay, yeah. I mean, I think me, like probably everybody else, got scared over the pandemic when you're watching these videos, and it's like you had the FAA was sitting there, and they had, their employees, or was seemingly, maybe I was watching the wrong video, sitting there and just watching drone footage on YouTube, and just people just posting dumb things and tagging it and leaving themselves open. But I mean,
Yeah, and I'll say this because I don't want to be a fear monger because that's really not the purpose. But
mhm.
the FAA will always reach out first to educate, and so do not go fly your drone. Don't hesitate to fly. People make mistakes. Just be careful with aircraft. That's really the bottom line. Don't fly near airports, too close to airports, close to aircraft. Harassing, aircraft that are flying up in the air, and then you'll be fine. But the FAA is not as heavy-handed as we might think they are. They want to educate first, and so they might send people like me as a drone pro and say, "Okay, give recurrent training to this person because they flew and they didn't know the rules." So most people, I think, just don't know the rule. It's not that they want to fly against the rule; it's that they just don't know the rule. So I'm glad that we can do this to help educate.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually good to know. Um, Another question coming from YouTube. Can you talk a little bit about the process to obtain the license for agricultural drones?
Oh, yeah. So there's 2 things that need to be done for agricultural drones. There needs to be a Part 137, not 107, Part 137 approval. This is an approval to carry chemicals with an aircraft, which a drone is an aircraft. So that's the first one. The FAA recently simplified the Part 137 process. You can just type FAA Part 137 on Google, and then you'll get to their page. And there's a pretty lengthy application that you need to do, but if you've been doing this, you should know all these details. And then more than likely, you're going to be flying a drone over 55 pounds, which is where Part 107 stops. So Part 107 concerns only drones that are 55 pounds and less. If it's over 55 pounds, then you need to look at 49 USC 44807. So 44807, that's a process to fly large drones. And that gets a little bit more complicated because you're going to need to have a manned aircraft pilot license, like a private pilot license or a sport pilot certificate, in order to fly those drones. There is a way to get a waiver to fly large drones with a Part 107 certificate. That gets complicated as well. And if you're interested in that, contact us, contact at pilotinstitute.com, and we can help you. But yeah, it's a pretty lengthy process.
So much to know. Like, what I know barely scratches the surface. Omid is asking, does the Air 2 have the pause button, or is that FPV specific?
FPV only, but the all of the other DJIs that have a GPS, they have a pause button. It's just letting go of the controls. So if you let go of the controls, the aircraft will stop and it will stabilize and stay right there. So if you don't know what you're doing, just let go of the controls and then it's going to hover.
I need to study that piece of advice alone for 20 hours. That's sometimes the hardest thing. You get all wound up in your head, but
Yep.
it's
Yeah, just
it's
let
hard
go
to
of the
remember. Just
controls.
That's great. Well, Greg, this was great. I mean, a ton of information here. I'm glad we now have a source I'm glad I now know that I have someone else on my team, Fred, that flies a drone. So I have a source right there on the team where I can go to, and we'll have to link up on some Pilot Institute classes together.
Yeah, oh, you get it. So this is what we do. We love what we do. We have a ton of drone pilots on staff as well. So we love answering questions, and our YouTube channel has a ton of free information as well. I know people always look for information, but we verify the information that we have, and so does our community. They verify it for us. So we spend a lot of time putting out content, and we love it.
That's awesome. Well, Greg, I want to thank you, the Pilot Institute, for making this all possible. We have a ton of links that we dropped during this past hour for you guys to check out. So definitely check out the free content. Think about supporting our speakers, as we always do. Love to support our speakers. And Greg, you're always welcome back here. That was a great presentation, a ton of very well laid out information. So huge thank you to you.
I appreciate it, Derek.
Awesome. Well, huge thank you to Greg and the team over there at the Pilot Institute, and to all of our viewers out there. It's always more fun when you guys engage. So thanks for your questions and your views. That is it. That's all we have in the books for today. Another round of the B&H virtual event space now in the books. Catch you on next time.